Hello, we are in Genesis chapter 4, verse 16. Now, last time we were talking about the sin of Cain, how he killed his brother Abel, and it didn't have anything to do with the kind of offering he made. It had to do with his heart, so we have to guard our heart against sin. And verse 16 continues. Then Cain went away from the presence of the Lord and settled in the land of Nod, east of Eden. Cain knew his wife, and she conceived and bore Enoch. When he built the city, he called the name of the city after the name of his son Enoch. To Enoch was born Ired, and Ired fathered Mehujael. Mehujael fathered Methusael fathered Lamech, and Lamech took two wives. The name of one was Ada, and the name of the other Zillah. Ada bore Jabal, and he was the father of those who dwell in tents and have livestock. So you could see the emergence of cities, the emergence of having animals and tending animals, having livestock, and people living in tents. And you could also see the emergence of instruments. And it's interesting, I remember reading that instruments, even from an archaeological perspective, instruments were one of the first things people started sort of making and using. Verse 21, his brother's name was Jubal, and he was the father of all those who play the lyre and pipe. And again, sorry, you could just see now that the instruments, the Bible's talking about the instruments. Verse 22, Zillah also bore Tubal Cain. He was the forger of all instruments of bronze and iron. The sister of Tubal Cain was Naamah. You see, now we can see the emergence of metallurgy, how people were able to work metal, bronze and iron, making all kinds of things, instruments, weapons and things like that. Now here comes an interesting part. Lamech said to his wives, Ada and Zillah, hear my voice. You wives of Lamech, listen to what I say. I have killed a man for wounding me, a young man for striking me. If Cain's revenge is sevenfold, then Lamech is 77-fold. So, sorry, I just forgot to turn off my phone. So if you think about Lamech, the boasting, it's just unbelievable how much boasting he does. And it's really, if you think about it, shows how sinful we really are. And he thinks he's more important or should be held in a higher regard than Cain. Because in the previous video we were talking about Cain to be avenged sevenfold, but now he's making his out as if he's 11 times more important or more precious because he should be avenged 77-fold. I read that he behaves sort of like a king, but kings didn't really used to have this sort of mentality because of personal atrocities, because somebody was attacking their persons. But they would, because avenging 77-fold probably meant warfare. So starting a war because of somebody personally striking him or wounding him, that wouldn't have really resulted in an all-out war in the Middle East at the time, in the Asian Middle East. In any case, I think we have to be really careful when it comes to boasting, because that's one of the things, self-deception. I think it's a sort of the result of self-deception when we think that we are more than we actually are. So we have an inadequate understanding about ourselves. In verse 25, And Adam knew his wife again, and she bore a son and called his name Seth. For she said, God has appointed for me another offspring instead of Abel, for Cain killed him. To Seth also a son was born, and he called his name Enosh. At that time, people began to call upon the name of the Lord. I remember learning in school, one of our lecturers said that the longing for the Lord you cannot really eradicate from people's heart. And the Soviet Union tried this. North Korea tried this. If you read Marx, he thinks that religion is the opioid of the masses. And if you read Nietzsche, he thought along similar lines. He thought that it was like alcohol. It sort of caused people not to be able to be in control of their own thoughts, because religion, they thought, just poisons everything. But at the same time, eternity is written on our hearts, if you will, and you cannot undo what God has written on our hearts. And I remember getting back to what my teacher said, that in the Soviet Union they tried to, well, they did make religion illegal. There's a really good book called The Gulag Archipelago by Alexander Solzhenitsyn, and he talks about his experiences in the gulags, and he was talking about how the Russians or the Soviets, they were just rounding up religious leaders, executing them, and then looting the churches, the temples, the churches, looting them, taking everything that was there. And then my teacher said that the moment the Soviet Union collapsed, the churches were full again. So it's really, really difficult to eradicate eternity from people's heart. And yes, fair enough, we are all wired differently. There are people who are atheists or non-believers, but even in contemporary society, if you look at China, if you look at North Korea, they look at the underground churches, especially in China, the number of people are getting saved. And there are reports, if you really dig into the Middle East, in Middle East, people are coming to Christ as well by masses. So I think what we can take away from this section is that we have to be careful not to be boasting, not to be proud, because it doesn't take us anywhere, and eternity is written on our hearts, so we can't get rid of it. Amen.